Look at this face. One eye is ruined, the socket collapsed inward around an old wound that healed over long ago. The right arm ends near the elbow, the forearm simply gone. Deep inside both ears, bone has grown across the canals, leaving him nearly deaf. This man was half blind, half deaf, one-handed, and he walked with a limp that dragged his crippled leg through the snow, and he lived to be an old man. In the Ice Age in the mountains, 75,000 years ago, a hunter who could not hunt, a watchman who could not hear the thing moving in the dark, a body so broken it should have failed within a season. By every rule of survival, he should have died young and alone, out on the cold slope where he fell. He didn't. He lived for years, broken, kept alive by other hands. That is not a mystery of bones, it is a mystery of the heart. It is the oldest one we have, and it was answered in the dark, in the cold, by people we spent 100 years calling brutes. His name to us is Shanidar I, but the men who dug him out of an Iraqi cave in 1957 gave him a warmer one. They called him Nandi. He was a Neanderthal, one of a people who lived across this land for hundreds of thousands of years before our kind ever arrived. They were not the stooping brutes of old drawings. They were strong, clever, cold-adapted hunters who had mastered a world that would kill most of us in a week. And Nandi's skeleton is a record of catastrophe written in bone. Something struck the left side of his face hard enough to shatter the cheek and crush the eye. The blow likely blinded that eye and injured the part of the brain that governs the right side of the body. His right arm withered and shrank. In time it was lost below the elbow. His right leg turned inward and dragged. The bones of both ear canals grew closed, sealing him into near silence. Picture the man this left behind. Anna is only a girl the first time she sees him fall. Not this ruined elder yet, a hunter still in his strength, thrown from a ledge or gored or crushed under stone. The group gathers around the wreck of him. In furs and firelight they do the arithmetic that every band living on the edge of starvation must do. These are not people with a surplus. There is no store of grain, no herd in a pen, no neighbors to beg from. There is only what they kill this week and what they carry on their backs. In a world that tight, a person who cannot pull their weight is not a small problem. They are the difference between the band surviving the winter and the band losing a child to hunger. He cannot walk out on his own. He cannot carry a load, he will never hunt again. Every mouth in this band costs a hunt's worth of meat, and winter is already coming down the passes. By the pure cold logic of survival, he is finished, dead weight on a body that cannot afford it. The practical thing, even the merciful thing, is to leave him for the mountain and move on, and they do not. Someone lifts his head from the rock, someone brings water to his lips. Anna wedges herself under his good shoulder and takes his weight against her own small frame. The band turns not down toward safety, but back up toward the cave and matches its pace to a broken man's crawl. It will cost them the daylight, it may cost them the season. In that single choice made without a word we will ever hear, a different kind of creature is climbing the mountain. One that has decided a life is worth more than what it can carry. Every other animal on that mountain would have moved on. The wolf leaves the wounded wolf. The herd abandons the lame. It is the harshest and most reliable law of the wild, and it works. These people break it knowingly at a price they can feel in their own empty stomachs, and they will keep breaking it dawn after dawn until the man they carried up this slope dies of old age instead of the fall. We tend to imagine compassion as a single moment, a hand extended across a gap, a life pulled back from an edge once dramatically. Nandi's body tells a slower, harder, more astonishing story than that. When we look at his wounds, they are not fresh, they are old. The broken edges are smoothed and remodeled, sealed over, grown around with new bone. Healing like that does not take days or weeks, it takes years, which means the choice made on the mountain that first day was not made once. It was remade every single morning for years by people who could have stopped at any time and did not. Anna grows from a girl into a woman inside that daily choice. Each dawn she brings him out to the fire. Each dusk she brings him back into the dark. She learns to speak to him without sound because he cannot hear her. A hand laid flat on his shoulder means the meat is ready. A hard grip on his wrist means danger, be still, make no noise, wait. She has become his ears and she does not resent it. She has known him her whole life. He is simply hers to keep now, the way the fire is hers to feed. Now understand what that deafness truly meant in this place. These are the same mountains where cave lions and leopards move through the night. A hunting people stays alive by hearing the snapped twig, the low cough of a big cat in the brush, the scrape of claw on stone. A man who cannot hear any of that is a man who cannot save himself. He would never know the thing was there until it was on him. So for years, others did his hearing for him, keeping watch over a man who could not keep watch over himself. There is a cost buried in this that we smooth over with the warm little word care. Meat carried up a mountain to a mouth that will never bring any back, broken nights, a slower march, a smaller hunting range because the band will not outrun him. A heavier, hungrier winter paid for and paid for again. And in return, his company, his memory, perhaps the old knowledge of a man who had hunted these slopes before the youngest of them were born, the warmth of another body against the cold at night, the simple, stubborn, irreplaceable fact of him, still here, still theirs. We do not know if they loved him the way we mean that word. And there is one more thing his teeth reveal. They are worn down almost to the roots, and worn in a strange way, because with only one working arm, he used his mouth as a second hand, gripping and pulling hides and sinew with his front teeth for years. He was not idle, he adapted. He fought to stay useful with the one hand he had left, and the group met that effort halfway, and then some. But we know they kept him. For years, they chose him over the arithmetic every single day. That is a kind of love that needs no other name. Here is the part that should stop you cold, because it is not a story we are telling. It is a fact we can hold in our hands. Bone is honest. It cannot lie about how a person died, and it cannot lie about how long they lived after being hurt. When you die at the very moment of an injury, the break stays raw forever, sharp edges, splinters, no repair. The bone froze at the instant of death, but when you survive, bone goes to work. Living bone dissolves the ragged edges, lays down fresh material, and slowly remodels the entire wound into a rounded, healed scar. Every one of Nandy's terrible injuries shows exactly that healing. The crushed face, the lost arm, the ruined leg, the sealed ears, all of them old, smoothed, survived. He did not die of these wounds. He lived on past them by years, and every one of those years is a promise that was kept. And a Neanderthal in that landscape so broken could not have kept himself alive for a single winter, let alone many. Someone had to. A one-armed, half-blind, deaf man cannot gather enough food, cannot defend himself, cannot keep pace with a band that must move to survive. The healed bone is the fingerprint of the hand that fed him. Now the honest part, because good history means arguing with yourself. Skeptics push back on the tender reading, and they deserve a hearing. Maybe they say the band was rich enough that carrying one weak man cost them almost nothing. Maybe he performed small, useful tasks we simply cannot see in the bones. Maybe we read our own modern tenderness backward into ancient people because we badly want the Neanderthals to be like us. That is a fair and necessary warning, but strip every ounce of sentiment away, and the bone still says the same thing it always said. A body broken this badly does not reach old age by luck. Survival that long, that damaged, in terrain this merciless, requires other people who looked at a man who could give them nothing and decided, again and again, that he was worth the trouble. And Nandy is not the only one. Across the record of Neanderthal life, we keep finding the same thing, the crippled, the toothless, the badly injured, all living on far past the point where the wild should have taken them. An old man with no teeth left who must have been given soft food, a hunter who survived wounds that should have been a death sentence. This was not one soft-hearted band having one good day. It was a way of being, repeated across a continent and across the ages. You can argue about what they felt, you cannot argue with the healing. The kindness is written into the very material of him, not as a feeling we imagine, but as an act we can measure. Nandy was one body in that cave. He was not the last, and he was not alone. Across the same floor over many thousands of years, Neanderthals came back to this one place again and again to lay down their dead. That pattern alone is telling. In 2018, a team excavating that floor found another one, a woman we now call Shanidar Z. Her skull came out of the ground as flat as a pizza. 75,000 years of rock had pressed it into more than 200 separate pieces, thin as eggshell. It took a team of scientists 9 painstaking months to rebuild that skull from the shards, one fragment at a time, a high-stakes jigsaw with the pieces crushed. And here is why she matters so much. Shanidar Z was not simply caught in a rockfall and forgotten. She was laid down, deliberately, behind a large upright stone that may have stood as a marker. Her body and others near her rest in a channel worked into the hard cave floor by hand, a place made on purpose to receive the dead. Picture Anna, older now, her own hands aged, digging with a stone flake in her fingers into a floor that does not want to be dug, not because the ground demands it. Because the thought of leaving this body on the surface, to the hyenas, to the cold, to the dark, has become unbearable to her. She loved this woman. She will not abandon her now. And now the most famous part of all, told honestly. When the first Shanidar bodies were unearthed decades ago, scientists found clumps of ancient pollen in the soil around one of them. They called it the flower burial, the dead laid to rest on a bed of blossoms, mourned with wildflowers. It became one of the most beloved images in all of prehistory, and it moved millions. But newer research casts real doubt on it. Solitary bees that burrow into cave floors carry pollen down with them. So do small desert rodents called jerds, tunneling through the sediment. The flowers may be an accident of nature, not a gift from the grieving. So we should be brave enough to let the flowers go. But we do not have to let go of the grave. Bodies gathered on purpose in a channel dug by hand behind a deliberately placed stone that is far, far harder to explain away than a scatter of pollen. Think about what it takes to dig a grave at all. It is useless labor by the logic of survival. The dead cannot be helped. The effort could be spent hunting or resting or keeping the living warm. To scrape a hollow into a stone floor for a corpse is to declare that a person is more than a body, that they still matter even when they can never matter again in any practical sense. That is a thought, a large, strange human thought in a cave in the dark 75,000 years ago. They may not have brought flowers. They brought something rarer and heavier than flowers. They brought the dead home and they dug them a place to stay. For most of the last 100 years, we asked one question about these people over and over as if the answer were in doubt. Were Neanderthals really human? We drew them as brutes, hunched, dull-eyed, half-animal, a failed rough draft of ourselves that evolution had quietly discarded. We measured their thick skulls and doubted the minds inside them. We asked whether they could truly think, whether they could feel, whether they could love or grieve or count. And all that time, the answer was lying in a cave in the mountains of northern Iraq, written plainly in the shape of healed bone. A blind, deaf, one-armed man who lived to be old not by accident, but because others chose him, deliberately every day for years at real cost to themselves. A woman crushed to 200 fragments and given back a face after 75,000 years in the dark by people who wanted to look her in the eyes again. A place scraped into stone by hand to hold the ones they could not bring themselves to leave behind. For a long time we told ourselves that compassion, real compassion, was the thing that made us human, the trait that set our kind apart from all the others. But the Neanderthals were not our kind. They were a separate branch, a different people who split from our line hundreds of thousands of years before this. And they cared for their broken and they buried their dead in the mountains of Iraq without ever having met us. Whatever compassion is, it is older and wider than we are. They did not have our words. They may not have shared our beliefs about what waits beyond death, but they had the thing that lies underneath all of it. The flat refusal to let someone you love slip into the dark alone and uncared for. That is not the mark of a lesser kind of mind. It is the oldest and truest mark of ours. We spent a century asking whether Neanderthals were human enough to matter. We measured their skulls and tallied their tools and argued about their minds. They were not asking that question. They were living out a different one in the mountains in the cold, tens of thousands of years before we ever arrived to judge them. And when you stand in that cave now, and you look at the healed bone and the dug graves and the face rebuilt from 200 pieces, the old question turns around and points back at us, not whether they were human enough, but whether we, with all our words and all our certainty, would have done the same. Whether we would have carried the man who could give us nothing up the mountain into the winter for years. They already knew their answer. They had been living it all along. Who would carry their dead?